Hi, I'm Steve Barber with the Commemorative Air Force out of the Southern California Wing, Camarillo, California. And I'm standing in front of an A6M3 we brought out from California for the air show. Out of more than 10,000 Zeros built, this is one of 3 that are flying in the world today. Some searchers found this on an island called Balbo out in Indonesia, and it was still up on the 55-gallon oil drums as it was being worked on. And this one, along with 2 other wrecks, were found and taken apart and shipped back to the United States for ultimate rebuild. And that happened in the early 90s. And this particular aircraft was just completed in time to fly in the remake of the movie Pearl Harbor. The Dash 3 was a later version of the early model, which had extended wings, which allowed an extra 11 gallons in each side for longer range. You'll also notice the folding wingtips on it. And the reason they folded up just the tips is once they got the airplane done, they found out that it wouldn't fit on the aircraft carrier's elevator up and down. So they had to fold the tips because of the longer wings. The construction, it's very lightweight. They had very limited protection for the pilot. Matter of fact, the only armor plate on the airplane was behind the pilot. There were no self-sealing tanks. And if you've seen the World War II footage, every time they got hit, they would flame. And that's the reason. The tanks were strictly aluminum. No liners in them, and they would catch fire. You also notice, if you look at the windscreen on this, on the Mustangs and all the other fighters of America, they had bulletproof glass, which would stop a 50 caliber bullet. This has about 3/8 inch plexiglass. It wouldn't stop a BB. As a comparison, this airplane weighs about what an SNJ does with twice the horsepower. This has 1,250 horsepower, and it weighs about 4,850 pounds empty. So it goes very well. It's got a wide track gear, wants to track straight down the runway, and the handling characteristics in the air are very good. Stall characteristics are straightforward, and I think it's a joy to fly. This particular aircraft has 2 30 caliber machine guns mounted in the cockpit. The cocking levers are right in front of the pilot on his left and his right. And the shells, the expended shells, when he fires, go out little ports on each side of the cockpit. So you can only imagine how noisy, smoky, and just corruption goes on when those guns fired. They also have a 20 millimeter cannon mounted in each wing. And there's a selector switch on the throttle. If you click it forward, you'd have all guns firing. If you click the switch back, you'd have only the machine guns. And they were fired through the propeller with a synchronizer on the magneto. It's great to fly at an air show, and we do a dogfight routine with it with the Hellcat, and really displays the flying and handling characteristics of the airplane. That's when it's most fun, down low, and showing the turning capabilities in the aileron rolls. We did a film shoot with Steve Hinton. He was flying a Corsair, and they had us doing rolls in him in my tail. And Steve said, "Hey, you got to slow down the roll. I can't even catch you." So I was doing about a third stick deflection, and he was doing full stick deflection to roll at the same rate. So that shows you the capability of the airplane at slower speeds. Above 220 knots, it is not a lot of fun to fly. A lot of control pressure, especially on the ailerons, but also on the elevator. It just gets very, very heavy over 250 knots. With the Southern California Wing, we have an F6F Hellcat, F8F Bearcat, Mark 14 Spitfire, a Yak 3. So we have a lot of airplanes to compare this to. And for flying wise, I would say this is probably the closest to the Hellcat as far as performance, except the Hellcat, much higher top speed on it, and it'll climb faster at altitude than this airplane will. However, if the Japanese could get our American pilots below 175 knots, nothing would touch this airplane. It'll outturn anything that I've ever flown against it, except for a Bearcat. Bearcat's about the only thing you could win in a dogfight with this at slow speed.